You know, have you ever had a problem that was caused by just too much success? It sounds like a great problem to have, right? But that's exactly the situation we're going to dive into today. We're looking at a fascinating story about two relatives, a family dispute, and a single choice that would literally echo through history. And through their conflict, we're going to uncover some really powerful truths about vision, about generosity, and the unseen consequences of the decisions we make every day. So here's the central paradox. It's kind of wild. We have two men, an uncle and his nephew, Abram and Lot, and they've built something incredible together. You can almost think of them as partners in a massively successful startup. But here's the thing. They've grown so big, so fast, that their very success has become their biggest problem. Instead of bringing them together, it's actually pushing them apart and forcing them to choose totally separate paths. Okay, so how did they even get to this breaking point? Let's get into the first part of our story, what I like to call a problem of plenty. See, this wasn't a crisis born from some kind of failure. It was a crisis born from overwhelming success. It all started with what you might call a high-quality problem. Their wealth had simply become a liability.
And the scale of their success, it was staggering. The text here says Abram was very wealthy in livestock, silver, and gold, but this wasn't a one-man show. His nephew, Lot, who was traveling with him, also had enormous flocks and herds of his own. So they weren't just a big family. They were essentially two nomadic empires operating side by side.
And that, right there, was the core logistical problem. Imagine two giant companies trying to share a single warehouse. You know that eventually you're just going to run out of space. The source material is super clear on this point. Their stuff was so great that the land itself just couldn't support them together. There wasn't enough grass, not enough water, not enough room for their combined operations to function anymore.
So what happens when resources get scarce? Well, you get conflict. Their employees, the herdsmen who were actually out there managing the livestock, they started fighting over wells and grazing rights. Tensions were rising, and this family business was seriously on the verge of a complete internal breakdown. Their success was actively poisoning their relationship. And this brings us to the second part of the story, Abram's offer of peace. Now look, as the senior partner in this whole operation, Abram could have just pulled rank. He had every right to dictate the terms of their separation. But instead, he proposes something completely unexpected, something that prioritizes harmony over his own advantage. And this quote, this really reveals the first key insight of the story. For Abram, the relationship was way more valuable than the resources. He chose harmony over hierarchy. He saw his nephew not as a business competitor, but as family. And that's a profound leadership lesson right there. Protect the relationship, even if it means you might take a loss.
So this leads to the most important question in the whole conflict. Who gets to pick their new territory first? In any negotiation, the power usually lies with the person who has the most leverage, right? Abram is the elder, he's the patriarch. By any cultural or business standard of that time, the choice should have been his, no question. And his solution just reveals everything about his character. Abram does the unthinkable. He completely gives up his leverage. He just hands the choice and all the strategic advantage that comes with it to his younger nephew. He basically says, look, the whole land is out there. You pick whatever you think is best, and I'll take whatever is left. It's just an incredible act of trust and generosity.
Okay, so now the spotlight turns to Lot. He's just been handed a golden opportunity, right? The entire landscape is laid out in front of him, and he gets first pick. So, what would you do in his position?
Well, Lot does what most of us would probably do. He uses his eyes. He scans the horizon and sees an absolute paradise. The plain of the Jordan River is described here as being lush, green, and well-watered. For someone whose entire business is based on grazing animals, this looked like the obvious, no-brainer, slam-dunk choice.
So let's just break down his decision. It was logical, it was practical, it was based entirely on immediate, visible benefits. From a purely business perspective, it was the smart move. But there's this crucial little detail hidden in the text. His choice also put him near the city of Sodom, a place that was known for its wickedness. So Lot chose based on what he could see, but he may not have seen the whole picture. And just like that, the decision is made. Lot takes the prime real estate, that lush green valley. Abram is left with the land of Canaan, which by comparison was probably a lot drier and less immediately appealing. On paper, it looks like Lot won this deal, hands down. But as we get into the final part of our story, we see that what looked like a win, well, it wasn't the end of the story. This is where we uncover this profound difference between a choice based on sight and a life based on vision. Let's see what happens next. This slide right here, this really captures the fundamental contrast of the entire story. See, Lot shows something tangible, something immediate, and something that was geographically limited. But Abram, in return for his generosity, was given something intangible, something delayed, and something that was seemingly without limits. So immediately after Lot leaves, Abram gets his reward. And the scale of it is just staggering. He is told to look in every direction, north, south, east, and west. While Lot chose one specific, well-watered plain, Abram is promised everything on the horizon. His act of generosity wasn't just returned, it was multiplied beyond comprehension. And the promise wasn't just about land, it was about legacy. He was promised descendants as countless as the dust of the earth. And this is the ultimate takeaway. Lot chose a finite resource for his livestock. Abram, by prioritizing the relationship and acting on a vision for the future, was given an infinite legacy. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. You see, Lot chose the finished product, that lush valley that was already perfect. Abram was left with the raw material, the less appealing land, but he was also given a promise of what it could become. So the question for us is, in our own lives, in our own careers, are we choosing based on the immediate, visible payoff? Or are we willing to choose the less obvious path, guided by a greater vision of what we can ultimately build?